الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على سيدنا ومولانا محمد في كل لمحة ونفس عدد ما وسعه علمك. My dear esteemed brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Once again, let me welcome those of you who are here. Some of you may have just come in and not been with us from the earlier part of the program this morning. Welcome to the Muslim Forum on Islam and the Challenges of the Modern Age. This morning we were fortunate, inshallah, to hear from our esteemed scholar Maulana Siddiq Ahmad Nasir, who made his presentation on an Islamic view of the intellectual, moral and spiritual challenges of the modern age. And today, of course, being the highlight of the International Islamic Retreat being held in Trinidad and Tobago at the moment, the all-day public forum where members of the public get the opportunity to join with us, those of us who have been working on the retreat, to meet our foreign participants and to get to know some of our brothers and sisters from around the world. We had that session followed by a brief question and answer session, and the next session will follow a similar format. We have none other than our distinguished scholar Maulana Imran Nazir Hussain to deliver his lecture entitled An Islamic View of the Political and Economic Challenges of the Modern Age. And when he's finished, we'll also have the opportunity to have an interactive question and answer session. All of the participants who have come for this retreat have come by and large because of their familiarity and their acquaintance with the work of Maulana Imran Nazir Hussain, who has been working tirelessly for a number of years, not just here in Trinidad and Tobago, but around the world, to spread the message of Islam and to give his own interpretation of Islam as it applies to the modern age. Those of us who have been with him and following him over the last few years on his recent return to Trinidad would know that there are certain topics with which he, unlike many of the other scholars around, tends to delve in, and these are topics which are very apt and very appropriate for the times that we are living in today. He's a powerhouse of knowledge himself, and he always gives a very dynamic insight and interpretation on the Quran and how it applies to the modern world, the challenging times that we live in, and the onslaught or the attacks that we as Muslims are being faced with and will increasingly face with as the time moves on. So without further ado, I take great pleasure now to invite Maulana Imran Hussain to deliver his lecture, An Islamic View of the Political and Economic Challenges of the Modern Age.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. We begin with Allah's blessed name. We praise Him and we glorify Him as He ought to be praised and glorified. And we pray for peace and for blessings on all His noble messengers, and in particular on the last of them all, the blessed Prophet Muhammad sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam. We are particularly honored here in Jordan Hill, a suburb of San Fernando in Trinidad and Tobago, to have with us for the first time ever those who have come from so far and so wide. We have Samia Masri from Ghana with us here. We have Abdul Qayyum Rodriguez from Belgium, or is it Holland? We have Stephen Cross, Isa from Britain. We have Devi Baka from the United States. We have Hasbullah from Singapore, my dear student. And Muhammad, they spell it Mogamat, Muhammad Abrahams from South Africa. Diane Diallo from Senegal. A brother from Mali, one from Poland, from Australia, from Egypt, from Kenya, from Palestine, from Algeria, all here in this hall. But we have Karen Eccles from Brooklyn. We have Karima Rashid from San Francisco. But there are two couples we have to make mention of because they got married recently, and we want to pray that Allah may bless their marriage. There is Paweł Bialas from Poland, he's somewhere around, and his wife Amina Muhammad from Kenya. And there is Davi Baka from the United States, and his wife Zahra Bilu from Pakistan. May Allah bless your marriages. Ameen. We also want to enter into the records the great work done by the organizers, the San Fernando Jama Masjid, or Masjid Jamia, by the Islamic Broadcasting Network, IBN, by the Islamic Missionaries Guild, by the Barakpur Islamic Center, and last but not least at all, Masjid Hidayah in Cedras, which hosted us yesterday, and what a lovely day it was in Cedras and Icacos. So we were very close. We could even say hello to Hugo Chavez. And then we had such a wonderful presentation from Imtiaz Hussein to Egypt, and I love the Egyptian food. And then after 1 year I went to Pakistan. I didn't like the Pakistani food. But I became the student of Maulana Fadlur Rahman Ansari rahimahullah at the Alimia Institute of Islamic Studies. And after a few months, we were the first students. He organized the first grand public function so that Karachi and Pakistan could see Alimia Institute. And we had to give our talks in different languages, and I had to give mine in Spanish. In those days I could speak a little bit of Spanish. But Maulana then gave his address, the first one that I heard from him in Pakistan. I had heard him here in Trinidad. And I want to take you back to that address of his. He gave a picture of the world today in which he said that appearance and reality were not the same. No. He took us through some political history and then said the appearance is that we now have achieved political independence. But then he said the reality is different. We do not as yet have true political freedom and independence. Indeed, we're moving in the opposite direction. And then he took us through some economic analysis, not only with reference to the United Nations organization in his political analysis, but the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, etc., in his economic analysis. And then he said that the appearance is that we now have economic freedom. But I want to say to you, we are still in economic slavery. He used the word slavery. And then he ended that address, if I remember correctly, by pointing towards the greatest slavery of all. He said, you think you are intellectually free, but rather you should know that you are still in intellectual slavery. And that is the greatest slavery of all. Maulana Siddiq Ahmad Nasir, who I consider to be his most learned student, spoke to you this morning about that intellectual predicament of the Ummah. And he took us in the direction of the link between the intellect and the spirit, the spiritual life. There are those who see with only one eye, like the Antichrist. They see with only one eye. And with that eye, they have come to the conclusion that this is the best world there's ever been. I mean to say, you now have motor cars. You don't need a donkey cart anymore. You now have aeroplanes. You even have the toilet inside the house now. What progress. This is the best of all worlds. This is a world which has come into being in consequence of the dominance of modern Western civilization. A civilization which has been produced by a strange and a mysterious alliance, rapprochement, an alliance between European Christians and European Jews. Not the rest of the Christian world and not the rest of the Jewish world. Modern Western civilization has given us the modern scientific and technological revolution, which is still continuing and which continues to dazzle mankind. And it declares to us that this is the best of all worlds. All previous civilizations have now been superseded, including Islam. They're now redundant. They now belong to the museums of history. And so this is the best. And there is nothing to come which will supersede today's dominant way of life and dominant culture and civilization. But there are those who see with two eyes. Dajjal, the false Messiah, the Antichrist, sees with one. But there are those who see with two eyes, not only the external eye, with which we have the capacity for external observation, but also the internal eye, the eye of the heart. And when they look with both these eyes, the external and the internal, they recognize something different. Appearance and reality are not the same. Indeed, they look like they're opposite to each other. This is not the best of all worlds. No. This is the worst of all worlds. This is a world in which truth, which is in the religious way of life, is under attack. Those who control the world today are waging war on the religious way of life. Those who control the world today are reducing religion to something that is for the museums of history. Those who today control the world are giving to us a way of life which is essentially godless. Yes, you have more churches around the corner than ever before. But despite all the hullabaloo and all the paraphernalia and all the drum beatings, the religious way of life is disappearing. And in its wake is coming one essentially godless, abominably decadent, globalized society. Mainstream society around the world. Wherever you go seems to look the same. It's McDonald's here, and it's McDonald's in Mecca, and it's McDonald's in China. A universal, a globalized society emerging for the first time in history. And it argues, without even batting an eye, it argues that a man can marry a man, And those who would criticize this alternative sexual preference to be a people who are suffering from a disease called homophobia. That's not progress. Those who see with two eyes say that this is the worst of all worlds. And it's not just the worst in terms of the brainwashing of mankind, so that your children are now taught by television, the brainwashing of mankind, so that your heroes are now this one from Hollywood and that one from Hollywood. The brainwashing of mankind is just one part of the modern way of life. But there is more political oppression in the world today than ever before. Ask those from Afghanistan who are present in this hall today. And they are from Afghanistan here with us. There is more economic oppression in the world today than ever before in history. Ask Africa. We have Mali here with us today. We have Senegal here with us today. We have Kenya here with us today. We have South Africa here with us today. Go ask them. And they'll tell you of Africa, down in the dust, not just poverty, but destitution. And the wealth of Africa is being drained out of Africa by a people whose greed is indescribable. And it's inexplicable. How can a people have so much greed in them that even from the poor, even from those who have nothing, even from them they will suck the last drop of blood? This is not the best of all worlds. This is a world in which freedom is disappearing. This is a world in which slavery is coming back. And we commend Maulana Siddiq Ahmad Nasir for standing up and offering an intellectual challenge to those who today control the world intellectually. What he did and what I am attempting to do, inshallah, in offering a critical analysis, in pointing and exposing oppression, in pointing and exposing corruption around the world, we are fulfilling a duty that the Quran has placed upon us, you and I. Our Prophet Muhammad, Allah's blessings be upon him, and I hope, Trinidad, you are listening. He said, if you see something wrong, and don't tell me you have not seen Guantanamo, because it's just around the corner. Your government may not see it, because it's not convenient for governments in this part of the world to take a look at Guantanamo. But he said, if you see something wrong, something evil, like that abominable cesspit called Guantanamo, and thank Allah for Dr. Eric Williams, who stood up and demanded the return of Chagaramas. They had a base here in Trinidad called Chagaramas, just close to Venezuela on the north. And if Dr. Williams had not marched in the rain to demand it back, today we might have had in Chagaramas another stinking cesspit. You may not like this violent language of mine, but someone has to be the voice for those who have no voice. if Dr. Williams had not stood up and declared, Massa Day done, today Shagaramas might be a stinking cesspit of oppression and torture. Those who see with two eyes say, this is the worst of all worlds, politically and economically as well. How do we break the chains of slavery that is tightening around us? As we proceed with this talk, we'll give you the evidence that the chains of political slavery are tightening. The chains of economic slavery are tightening. Before we proceed to explain that, how do we break these chains? Maulana Siddiq Nasir, in his brilliant presentation, pointed to the necessity of pursuing the spiritual quest. I would use different language. I would say that we need a revolution. I would say that we need an internal revolution. I would say we need an internal spiritual revolution. And you don't need to go to Al-Azhar University for that. In fact, that's the last place I'll go for it. Malcolm X never went to Al-Azhar. Malcolm X could not speak Arabic. But Malcolm X was a man who was internally free. He was not a house slave in a White House. No. He was a slave like all the rest of us. But he was a field slave, he said, because inside of him, he was free. And if we are to be a free people, if we are to recover freedom, in order to pursue the quest for political freedom, in order to pursue the quest for economic freedom, which we will be explaining this afternoon, the first thing we have to do, Trinidad and Tobago, is to be internally free, to pursue an internal spiritual revolution. And if your corner church or temple cannot lead you to it, come to Islam. Come to Islam. Come to those who are not afraid to stand up, to point to the oppressor and declare him to be an oppressor. This is not that presentation of Islam that they like in the media, that they like on television. The radio stations love that kind of Islam. Our foreign guests, of course, would not know what I'm talking about. But those who went to school here in Trinidad would know that in ABC, we had a rhyme for that kind of Islam. Pata cake, baker's man. As fast as you can. No. No Trinidad and Tobago. You're not going to get pata cake, baker's man. Not from the students of Maulana Fadl Rahman Ansari, rahimahullah. If you see something wrong, something false, said the Prophet of Allah, change it with your hand. The Security Council of the United Nations could respond anyhow they want. But you cannot change the word of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Change it with me. How stable is the family? The stability of the family is dependent not only on marital fidelity, but also upon each partner in the marriage fulfilling his and her responsibilities and duties as a husband, as a wife, and as a father, and most of all, as a mother. If you see something wrong, change it with your hand. And if you can't change it with your hand, then change it with your tongue. Where are their tongues today? Those who believe only in this patacake, baker's man presentation of Islam. We're not being harsh because we want to belittle them. We're being harsh because we want to wake them up. He said, if you cannot change it with your tongue, then change it with your heart. But you can't go lower than that. That's the lowest stage of faith. The process begins with an internal spiritual revolution. And when that revolution takes place, then you get something in the heart called Nur. We used to have a president in this country called Nur. And when he was president, there was no fire water in the president's house. But I'm talking about Nur, light. A light which is not sold in the stock market. A light which comes from Allah, Most High. But when you recite Suratul Kahf on the day of Jummah, that also gives you light. Light that will stay with you from the heavens to the earth until the next Jummah. And when you have that light in your heart, then you would recognize that we live in a world today in which appearance and reality are opposite to each other. 45 years ago, he gave that lecture in Pakistan. 45 years later, it has come back to me to share it with you. There is an uncanny parallel between the world in which we live today and a world of yesterday to which the Quran has directed our attention. And so we don't need to do too much research to understand the reality of the world today, its politics and its economics, if we use that parallel that the Quran has given. It's a parallel with ancient Egypt, and we have an Egyptian here today. There was an Egypt which was godless. It declared, Ana Rabbukumul A'la, I am the Lord Most High. Today the state does the same thing. The modern secular state declares precisely the same thing that ancient Egypt said. The modern secular state declares that the law of the state, the law in this constitution, is the highest law. And any other law which is in conflict with this law is null and void, including God's law. That's Trinidad and Tobago's constitution. So there is, of course, the most godless constitution in the world, of course, is the U.S. Constitution. So there is a parallel between ancient Egypt of Pharaoh and today's modern world. In ancient Egypt, there was slavery. And the slavery was not just for political purposes, that was peripheral. Because the Israelites posed no really serious problem to Pharaoh. It's just that the Israelites had backed a non-Egyptian king in the eastern delta. And the Egyptians hated that non-Egyptian rule. And so when they got rid of it, then they turned against the Israelites. But ancient Egypt, Pharaoh's Egypt, turned to slavery for economic purposes. How can you build all these pyramids? How can you build all these big monuments all over Egypt without slave labor? Today it's the same. They're not only rich, they're growing richer. And Haiti must work. Our neighbor, Haiti, that the PNM government of this country doesn't care to look towards at all. Spend your money on stadiums, but let Haiti remain in groveling destitution and poverty. They exploit the poor. They exploit Haiti right here next door. They exploit the masses of South America. The Indians, the red Indians. We here are called the West Indians. Those are the red Indians. Until a man like Evo Morales could come out of Bolivia, and a man like Hugo Chavez could come out of Venezuela to say enough is enough. We cannot stand this economic oppression. We want to take control of our resources. There is a parallel between that ancient Egypt and this modern world. It's not just politics and economics. It's also intimidation, violence, slaughter, crucifixion. They did it in Guantanamo. They did it in Abu Ghraib. They took, Trinidad, you'll be disgusted to hear this. They took copies of the Quran and sent it down the toilet. They took our people and stripped them naked and forced them to commit abominable acts to immigration. And immigration promised us that they would give the visa waivers. We're not complaining too much because we're grateful that you allowed so many to come. Today we live in a world in which there's intimidation and slaughter. You're picked up from a street and you disappear in Pakistan. Why? Intimidation. We live in a world today where if you want to perform the Hajj, you are forced. It's mandatory. You must have a swine flu vaccination. We're going to resist that. We don't want mandatory vaccination. We want to be allowed to choose. Life and death are in Allah's hands. But we know what kind of a bag of tricks you have. And we don't trust you. Our Prophet has warned us. He said that in the last age there'll be great liars. And we know about the lies. And we are not a people of patter cake bakers, man. We say, no, you did it. We say the Israeli Mossad and the CIA jointly planned and executed 9/11. If I were to say that in New York, I might disappear. And if you say we don't have the evidence for saying that, then we challenge you. Come forward, any one of you listening on the radio today. Come forward. If you say that the American government is truthful in what happened on 9/11, while we say they're telling monstrous lies to pursue political and economic goals that are despicable, if you say that they are truthful, then come forward and let us pray to the one God, the God of Abraham, the God of Moses, the God of Jesus, the God of Muhammad. Allah's blessings be upon them all. Pray to him, to ask him to visit with eternal curse and eternal punishment whosoever is untruthful in this matter, you or I. Come on, Rabbi, I'm waiting for you. There is an uncanny parallel between ancient Egypt and the world today, economically and politically. I want to take you to one verse of the Quran. Maulana Siddiq quoted many verses, I'll quote only one. And it's a story I have to tell. You may not agree with my interpretation of the verse, but don't let that be a source of a quarrel and a boxing match today, please. It is in Surah to Yusuf. Sorry, Surah to Yunus. And the Pharaoh and his army were pursuing Moses and his band of followers. And when we reached to the water, some of us thought we were trapped because we were between the devil and the deep blue sea. But then Allah inspired Musa alayhi salam, Moses, take your staff and strike the water. And as he struck the water parted. As tomorrow, something else will part when the Son of Mary comes back. And as the water parted, the land became dry, and we crossed safely to Sinai. Sinai, the desert, not the hospital in Manhattan. And then when Pharaoh attempted to cross with his army, Allah sent down the waters, and they were all drowned. وَإِذْ فَرَقْنَا بِكُمُ الْبَحْرَ فَأَنْجَيْنَاكُمْ وَأَغْرَقْنَا آلَ فِرْعَوْنَ وَأَنْتُمْ تَنْظُرُونَ. It happened before your very eyes. But something happened while Pharaoh was down there drowning. As tomorrow they will be drowning who today are waging war on Islam. So recklessly. Take a lesson from what happened to Pharaoh. As he was drowning, you know, drowning people, the veils come off the eyes. And as the veils came off the eyes, he realized that he was not God. And so he declared, I now believe in their God, the God of Banu Israel. This is just before he died. To which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala responded in Surah to Yunus, Al-an, now Pharaoh, وَقَدْ عَصَيْتَ قَبْلُ, and before this you were in obstinate, arrogant rebellion. وَكُنْتَ مِنَ الْمُفْسِدِينَ, and you were committing fasad. Fasad. Fasad is that which corrupts. A corruption which destroys. And there's political fasad. The Quran points to it. There is economic fasad. The Quran points to it. There's fasad in agriculture, destroying the purity of food. There's fasad in the male-female relationship. There's so many forms of fasad in the Quran. And Pharaoh is involved in many forms of fasad. فَالْيَوْمِ, Allah then responded, today, Pharaoh, فَالْيَوْمَ نُنَجِّيكَ بِبَدَنِكَ, this day we have decided to preserve your physical body. Badan, your body. Why? Why? لِتَكُونَ لِمَنْ خَلْفَكَ آيَةً, that your physical body, when it resurfaces in the historical process, when it is rediscovered one day, that body, when it is rediscovered, would function as a sign from above for a people who will take a little time to read the signs of Allah. لِتَكُونَ لِمَنْ خَلْفَكَ آيَةً. What is the sign? And now I give my opinion. You can agree or disagree. The sign is that those who live the way he lived will die the way he died. He waged war on Islam. And look at the end. He was an arrogant oppressor, all-powerful. Musa alayhi salam didn't even have a tank. No. And he oppressed. He used his power to oppress. That was political oppression. And he enslaved people, as today mankind is being enslaved. Massa Day ain't done. But we pray that Dr. Williams may be given the credit and the blessings for having stood up to declare Massa Day done. Massa's greatest day of all is around the corner. It's coming. He stood up and he denounced oppression. And today that oppression is coming back. Pharaoh was an oppressor, political oppression and economic oppression. He was involved in violence and slaughter as they are doing it today around the world. And most of all, he waged war on Islam. And so those who, in a time which is to come, and when the body of Pharaoh is discovered, that's the sign that the countdown has begun. That's the sign. And the message to them from the Quran is that you will suffer the same fate that he suffered. وَإِنَّ كَثِيرًا مِنَ النَّاسِ عَنْ آيَاتِنَا لَغَافِلُونَ. But most people, too busy to study the signs of Allah. There is an emerging political dictatorship around the world today. And the United Nations organization was created to facilitate the emergence of that political dictatorship. Why do those who control the UN, why do those who control political power, why do they want to establish the universal dictatorship? Why is democracy receding in the world today? Anti-terrorism laws encroaching on human rights. Why? It is because there is a plan being pursued. It is not by accident that Britain had a mysterious relationship with the Holy Land. It is not by accident that Britain gave us the Balfour Declaration, a secular Britain. In 1917, that the British government will work for the establishment of a Jewish national home in the Holy Land. Why? Why a secular state wants to establish a religious state in the Holy Land? I'll tell you why. Because there is a plan at work. Why does the United States use the veto in the Security Council so many times we can't count anymore? They don't have any shame. To protect Israel, so the baby can grow to become a powerful state, to become a superpower, to become a nuclear armed state, to have thermonuclear weapons, while Iran is being targeted. Why the relationship between the United States and Israel? I'll tell you why. Only one man can explain that answer, that question. And it is a man named Muhammad sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam. It is because the first ruling state in the world, the modern world, of Britain, had to give way to a second ruling state in the modern world, the United States of America, in order that a third ruling state might emerge, which will be the last ruling state, and which must rule the world eternally, so that a man can emerge in Israel, who will be ruling Israel, and who would rule the world from Jerusalem. And that man would declare, I am the Messiah. We know it in Islam, if you don't know it. We know it, and we can explain it to you. That man is the Antichrist. That man is Dajjal, the false Messiah. And unless you study this subject, your understanding of international politics, your understanding of international economics, your understanding of international monetary economics would be inadequate. Israel, however, cannot rule the world until Israel wages a big war and the territory of the state were to expand dramatically to encompass the biblical frontiers, the false biblical frontiers, of course, from the river of Egypt to the river Euphrates. Israel cannot wage that big war so long as Pakistan has nuclear weapons. And so all the maneuverings on the chessboard in Pakistan and in northwestern Pakistan and in Afghanistan does not fool us. We know what's your target. We know that your target is to destroy Pakistan's nuclear plants, destroy Pakistan's nuclear weapons, and remove Pakistan from the nuclear club. Because so long as Pakistan possesses nuclear weapons, it poses a threat to Israel in her ambition to rule the world. Similar is the case with Iran and its missile capacity. If this is the political scenario towards which we are moving in the world, what is the economic linkages with that political scenario, this political analysis? In order for Britain to become a ruling state, Britain had, among other things, Britain had to control money in the world. It was not by accident, but rather by design, that the Bank of England emerged in 1697, I think, and began issuing the first paper currencies. And these paper currencies were supposed to be redeemable. That is, you could take it to the bank and get the gold. And then, of course, if I did it, they'd lock me up and throw me in jail. You issue more paper than you have gold. You create money out of nothing. And then when the people realize that, there's a run on the bank and the whole thing collapses and people are ripped off. It happened at the end of the 17th century. And the same thing has been repeating and repeating and repeating again and again and again and again. When the Bretton Woods Accord emerged in 1944, it was just a more sophisticated arrangement for precisely the same scam. By 1971, Bretton Woods had collapsed so that the scam could move forward. The US dollar is the only currency in the world which was redeemable in gold at $35 an ounce. All the rest of the paper money in the world were not redeemable. They're like checks you can't catch. You could only change one check for another at a fixed exchange rate. But then in 1971, when Charles de Gaulle intervened in the matter, Bretton Woods collapsed. Richard Nixon declared, we gave our word, we don't have to keep our word. And he reneged on his treaty obligations under Bretton Woods and the Articles of Agreement of the International Monetary Fund. And so since 1971, it's just paper. You take a piece of paper, you're not going to believe me. You take a piece of paper, since 71, you print a picture on it, you put a number on it, and you say, abracadabra. And you assign an entirely fictitious value to it. We have in our gathering here a distinguished diplomat of the Trinidad and Tobago Foreign Service, my colleague who is here before me, who knows this subject. This is playing God to create wealth out of nothing. And one day they'll have to stand before Allah and answer to Him. Because the only way you can create wealth out of nothing, by assigning this fictitious value to the piece of paper, is that when someone takes that paper, uses it, boy, you have any more US dollars? Come. The more you accept that money, the more you are made to accept it, because you can't sell oil other than in US dollars. You can't trade. You can't travel. You need hard currency. Ours is soft, you know. That keeps their paper alive. So they can print and print and print and print paper. And the Saudis just keep on sending and sending and sending the oil. That's playing God. But that's not the only part of the scam through which they maintain their power and their control. It's not just military power. It's more than that. As they attack the paper, ask the South Africans who are here and they'll tell you about it. How the South African rand was attacked and attacked and attacked. As they attack, they target a currency and they cause that currency to fall in value. Or the IMF demands that you devalue. And as the value of the paper falls, guess what happens? There's a massive transfer of wealth from the unsuspecting masses to a predatory, excuse my language, a predatory, blood-sucking elite. And so it facilitates the political goal of control when you can impoverish them and reduce Bangladesh and reduce Pakistan and reduce Indonesia and reduce Africa to miserable poverty and destitution. Because hungry people, they can't wage any struggle. A hungry man would even worship an idol. What I have done in this brief moment with you, and I want to leave some time for the question and answers, what I've done with you today is to show you from the Quran that there's a parallel between that which went before in Egypt, between Pharaoh and Moses, alayhi salam, and that which is now happening. That one culminated with the destruction of the forces of falsehood and the forces of oppression. And this one will culminate with the destruction of the forces of falsehood and the forces of oppression. All that you have to do, those who follow Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, and who are prepared to stand up for what is truth, regardless of the price you have to pay, and who are not impressed by pata cake, bakers, mankind of Islam. All that you have to do is hold on while the storm is blowing. The wisdom of the Lord is great. It is His wisdom at work to test who are His true servants. Who are those who are going to spend all their time fighting over, should you put your hands here or should you put your hands there? Fighting over trivia. Fighting with each other in sectarian conflicts. He belongs to that camp. Me ain't going to listen to him. Excuse my Trinidad language now. He belonged to that camp. He had that kind of, that was his teacher. Me ain't going to listen to him. No, we are brothers. We are sisters. We are pursuing the same goal. We follow the same master, the same leader. If you have to differ with me, do it with love. If you have to differ with each other, do it with respect. Maulana Siddiq and I have been involved in a boxing match for a long time now. He's a heavyweight, I'm not. But our differences has never stopped us from working together. Why should your differences with me stop you from embracing me as your brother? Even when you differ with me, you could listen to me politely, and I will listen to you politely. The end will come the same way it came in Egypt. The end will come when the Son of Mary returns. And when the Son of Mary returns, remember the most powerful voice in history, the most powerful voice in history ever to have declared that the Son of Mary will one day return is the voice of Muhammad sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam. We know more about what's going to happen when he comes back, more than the Pope knows. The Pope essentially is always the white man, remember that. We know more about what's going to happen when the Son of Mary returns than even the Pope knows. We know the truth will triumph. Let us end with this verse of the Quran. هو الذي أرسل رسوله بالهدى ودين الحق ليظهره على الدين كله وكفى بالله شهيدا. He it is who has sent his messenger Muhammad sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam, sent him with the truth, sent him with a way of life based on truth, with the guidance, that it might prevail in the end. That it might prevail over all rivals. And Allah is sufficient as a witness of the truth of that end. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا يا مولانا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين آمين. تكبير الله أكبر تكبير الله أكبر تكبير الله أكبر.
Jazakallah khair, Maulana Sahib. A powerful presentation as usual, and all of us who have heard Maulana before would know that he's touched on so many of the things that he normally speaks about, but he's gone into much more than just the political and economic challenges of the modern age. I think Maulana seems to also have a degree in history. He remembers all these dates and events and things that happen, and you can't help but learn something from him when you hear him deliver a lecture. So much like with the presentation this morning, we're going to devote some time to a question and answer session, just about half an hour, inshallah. So we'll follow the same format of this morning. Brothers, if you have a question, you can come forward close to the table in front here. There's the cordless mic passing around, and sisters as well. Or you can write down your question and pass it to us. Just when you're asking your question, if you can give us your name and let us know where you're from, inshallah.
Ambassador Usman Ali, my colleague when I worked at the Foreign Service.
Assalamu alaikum again. Really a great pleasure listening to you, Brother Imran. It makes me feel very proud, both from your academic excellence and the quality of the Islamic knowledge. My question is a rather very simple, almost naive one. Why is it in Muslim countries, or what is perceived as Muslim countries, there is squalid poverty, moral bankruptcy, poor governance, in spite of the fact of what we talk about, the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad? What has gone wrong? Why is it, and how can we really market this religion? That's a problem. We are unable to market it. We are unable to. The problem also that some of us can't communicate. You're an excellent communicator. We are all trainees here. I make this analogy. Maybe in Trinidad and Tobago we have the steel band. I feel it's an excellent instrument. It's not only carnival and jump up. It's a lovely instrument, fascinating instrument. I hope the visitors get a copy of a steel band tune and say, here they play. Could you please, I'm making my point. Are you the moderator? Are you the moderator? Mr. Chairman, I take your permission. I'm trying to make an analogy which is in a comparison. That's another thing. The intolerance of Muslims towards non-Muslims. I was making the comparison that there's a good thing in the steel band, but we in Trinidad and Tobago, we are unable to market it. The same thing, we have an excellent thing in Islam, but we are unable to market it. Dr. Zakir, and I was also listening to Jean Myers there. And they're able to communicate and convince people. And that is one of the problems in Islam, unable to market it. So hence the reason, in spite of the slight aberration on my right, who is totally intolerant, who come, I don't know if he come to hear something else, but I'll forgo that. I mean, he... It's not my fault, thank you. Okay, Stanley Cook.
All right. We have, perhaps what he was trying to tell you is we have a steel band in Morocco. And he's a professional musician. And he was beating the drums last night in Morocco at a campfire. We need communicators. We need people who can market Islam. And I'm learning a lot of lessons from Tariq Ayub, the CEO of Muslim Channels TV of California, who made a tremendous sacrifice to come here today. And Tariq, we appreciate very much that you are here. He has these communication skills. We need people like Ashmead. I told Ashmead I'm going to keep him close to me now, because he has skills of management. We should have had him with us in the retreat from day one. But if I'm going to give you an answer, but I'll be crucified. If we are in the state we are today, there are a number of reasons for it, but I'll single one. I consider it to be the most important reason of all. But first, let me seek some protection from Nabi Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, to protect me when they want to crucify me. He said, the hadith is in the Sunan of Tirmizi, it is narrated by Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu, and he said, it would not be long when nothing will remain of Islam but the name. I wonder who would be responsible for that collapse. He prophesied it. And nothing will remain of the Quran but the traces of the writing. I wonder who would be responsible for this betrayal of the Quran. You read it for the dead, but you would not go to the Quran that it can explain the world to you. At that time, the masajid would be grand structures, iron and steel, multi-million-dollar buildings. Ambassador Usman's father was an imam. I've never met a man like him. I have never in my life met a man like his father, who'd ride a bicycle. Even through the rain, he'd drive it. He'd ride for hours to come to listen to a lecture on Islam, to learn. With so much humility in that man, all through his life. But today, grand structures, iron and steel, hullabaloo. Masajiduhum amiratun wa hiya kharabu min al-huda. But the masajid are devoid of guidance. Now listen to the last piece, and you get your answer. Who is most responsible of all, for all the squalor, all the destitution, all the poverty, all the slavery? Ulama'uhum. The ulama, the religious scholars, the maulanas, the muftis, the shuyukh, of those people with those grand structures and so on. Sharrun nasa mimman tahta adim as-sama. They would be the worst people beneath the sky. Why? I told you why. It's patake, baker's man. That's why. You have backbones made of recycled paper. Why can't you be like Malcolm? That's why. علماؤهم شر الناس ممن تحت أديم السماء من عندهم تخرج الفتنة وفيهم تعمون. They would be the center, sources of the corruption and collapse of our society and civilization. That's your answer, Usman, but I'm going to be crucified now. The next question? Yes, guys?
1 second.
BBC 7143. You know what you have to do. BBC 7143, you know what you have to do. Yes, Laith is from?
UK?
Britain, yeah. He was one of the last on the train coming here.
MashaAllah, Sheikh, commiserations to your speech. It was very good, MashaAllah, once again. Just wanted to clarify, really, a lot of us are going to go back to our countries, and we want to replicate or challenge people on a lot of the things that we've learned, especially the methodology and how you explain things. Many of us don't know Arabic, one person being myself. Does our foundation need to be in understanding the Arabic language in addition to support from your books for us to be able to justifiably, repeat exactly all the things we're learning? Do we have to build that foundation first, or is your books just sufficient and the English text sufficient to be able to articulate the message as you have to us?
My teacher of blessed memory, Maulana Fadlur Rahman Ansari Rahimahullah, spoke about different levels of understanding the Quran, the message of Islam. There's a basic level for the common people. But if you want to challenge the oppressor intellectually, you've got to rise higher than the basic level. You have to, at the highest level, you've got to probe. He calls it the probe level. Read that book, The Quranic Foundations and Structure of Muslim Society. The Malaysian edition, I think, is all sold out, but the Pakistani edition is at the back there. And it's a cheaper cost as well. He calls it the probe level. And if you want to study the religion at the probe level, to be able to discover the guidance in the Quran with which to understand the world that is unfolding around you today and to respond to it, then you'll need the Arabic language. There are pearls in the Quran, pearls. And you have to be guided to each pearl to discover it. And then in Maulana's inimitable description, you have to be able to bring the pearls together to make the necklace. He calls that the system of meaning of the subject. And I think it was on Thursday we talked about that methodology for study. But if you want to come to Trinidad, Maulana Siddiq Ahmad Nasir is about to become his student. Next question.
Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh.
Which is this? Oh, Milad from Australia. Oh no, he is Afghanistan really. Mm-hmm.
Sheikh, this is more of a comment and a question. I just personally, and I'm sure on behalf of the brothers, want to thank you, and just to make a note that I'm sure this message of yours is very hard for, like you said, for many people to accept, but maybe in family, maybe in community, but just I think you and as well as us have to recall what our Prophet ﷺ went through himself, the alienation, the years of just being left alone and looked at as something low. But in the end, haqq prevailed, and inshallah this will happen with this as well. Secondly, Sheikh, just the second thing I want to make a note of is that we came here not knowing any of each other, and I'm talking about the younger brothers here. Like you said, we're all over the world, from Australia, England, here, there, but mashallah, the bond that we've created just in a few days, it's like we've known each other for years.
This is Yusuf from California next to you.
Yes. And alhamdulillah, I've noticed like in my own family and my own society, a lot of the older generation, they have many disputes and things of little things. And alhamdulillah, I don't see that as much as in our generation. And inshallah, it's us who are going to be the leaders, the frontiers of the Islamic revolution. However, I just want you, if you could give us some advice, some nasihat about what we should do, and something that should stick with us always, no matter where we are in the world, no matter who we're with, our brothers or non-brothers, what we should do to each other.
Number one, I like the question. Number one, apart from those things that Allah has made obligatory on you, apart from those things, number one, recite Surah Al-Kahf on every day of Jummah, okay? Number two, stop the Quran from this cover. Don't stop until you reach the other cover. And when you finish, start back again. And when you finish, start back again. Keep on reciting the Quran. Keep on reciting the Quran cover to cover. Cover to cover. At the beginning, you might take 3 months to finish it. But then you make 2 months and 1 month. I was a student in Egypt, and Ramadan came. And I'm in buses, and in Egypt you have to be an acrobat. Because you have 1 foot on the running board, and you hold it on for dear life, and the bus is going. And I saw people in the buses packed like sardine, and one hand is holding on for dear life, and 1 foot is hanging out, and he has the Quran and he's reciting. I said, what kind of people are these Egyptians? I never saw this in Trinidad. If you are true to the Quran will be true to you. Listen to the verse. You ask the question, I'm giving it to you. It is in Surah Al-Furqan. Take it home with you when you go to sleep tonight. بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وقال الرسول, and the messenger said, Ya Rab, oh my Lord. He's complaining. He's complaining about something, and he's complaining to his Lord, and he's complaining about us. Ya Rab, inna qawmi ittakhadhu hadha al-Qur'ana mahjura. My people have forsaken this Quran. So the first step to return to the Quran is to return to the recitation of the Quran. My mother could not read Arabic correctly, broken. My father died when I was 15, and she had all these orphan children. Sometimes no food in the house. And so she struggled. But in the night time when she put the children to sleep, Imran would see her sitting in the sitting room, all by herself, reciting the Quran. And her tears would be falling on the pages of the book. She could not understand what she was reading. No. But the Quran gave her strength, as the Quran can give you strength. And the Quran can give you light. And the Quran can be your source of wisdom and knowledge. And the Quran can protect you. You can make this dua that I make. Oh Allah, kindly bless me with the knowledge of the Quran, and the wisdom of the Quran, and the guidance of the Quran, and the nur, the light of the Quran, and the shifa, the healing of the Quran. And kindly grant that this Quran might be a friend, companion, protector for me in the life of this world, and at the moment of my death, and when I'm on my grave, and on Judgment Day. This is the beginning. This is the beginning. It is the Quran that will take us out of the mess in which we are today. But for that we need a new methodology, a new tafsir, a new usul al-tafsir to complement the usul al-tafsir that we've already had. We don't need to change that. We need to augment it. Any more questions?
Assalamu alaikum. I'm Muhammad Abdulalim Dawes from Jamaica.
Oh, yes, I remember your call.
I have a question. The question is, I've heard
Jamaica is to the north, close to Cuba? Yeah.
I've heard you mention of the association of the Jews and the Christians, and say that these are the people that we should avoid. That Allah mentions in the Quran. Now, there are 2 places I've seen the Jewish, the star, known as the Star of David, the 6-pointed star. It's on the flag of Israel, and most of the emblems here in Trinidad and Tobago. If you look and see like the car of the police when it's passing by, you'll see that 6-pointed star. So I'm trying to find out now if there's some kind of association between the powers to be in Trinidad and Tobago and the Jews.
you are allowed to marry a Christian woman, other than in Malaysia. Malaysian law doesn't allow it. But the Quran allows you to marry a Christian woman. And when you marry her, she can be your friend, you know. Yeah. But the verse of the Quran has been translated. Surah Al-Ma'idah. Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu, O you who have faith in Allah. La tattakhidhu al-yahuda wal-nasara awliya. Do not take the Jews and do not take the Christians as your friends and allies. So you're going to have to tell her. In Trinidad, you call your wife Dudu. So you're going to have to say, Dudu, you can be my wife, but you can't be my friend, you know. Don't take the Jews and don't take the Christians as your friends and allies. بَعْدُهُمْ أَوْلِيَاءُ بَعْضٍ. They are friends and allies of each other. That's not true. That's false. Jews and Christians were never friends and allies of each other. Never, never, never Jews and Christians were friends and allies of each other. But that's the translation. Do not take the Jews and do not take the Christians as your friends and allies. They are friends and allies of each other. And whosoever from amongst you turns to them with friendship and alliance, you belong to them. You no longer belong to us. And surely Allah does not provide guidance for a people who commit such an act of ghulum, wickedness. That translation is not correct. No. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said that He ordered the angels to bow down, to prostrate before Adam alayhi salam. فَسَجَدُوا, and they all prostrated, illa Iblis, save Iblis. Yes, several times in the Quran. If you take this verse of the Quran by itself in isolation as a standalone verse, which you should not do, then you'd come to the wrong conclusion. The one that you should throw out of the window. With this wrong methodology, you'll come to the conclusion that Iblis or Satan was an angel. Because the order was given to the angels and they all bowed down except him. That defective methodology of studying a verse in isolation led to that mistake. Which is why Maulana Ansari rahimahullah in Quranic Foundations and Structure of Muslim Society warns about it. Don't do that. Take all the verses of the Quran. Try to find that which binds them together. Put all put the necklace together, all the diamonds, to get the system of meaning. And then you see that when you turn to the whole of the Quran, no. Not only was he not an angel, but he could not have been an angel. And then the Quran declares he was jinn. Similarly with this verse. If you take this verse in isolation, you'll never be able to get the true meaning. When you take the totality of the guidance, then you know Allah is not speaking of all Christians. No. And He's not speaking of all Jews. No. He is saying that there will come a time when there will be what I describe as a mysterious reconciliation between some Jews and some Christians. And a mysterious alliance will emerge. When that Jewish-Christian alliance emerges, do not take such Jews and such Christians as your friends and allies, who themselves are friends and allies of each other. This is the understanding of the verse that you'll arrive at when you take the totality of the guidance. And whosoever from amongst you turns to them, that Jewish-Christian alliance which emerged in Europe and which gave to the world modern Western civilization with its epistemological secularism, of which Maulana Siddiq had just spoken. Whosoever turns to them, belong to them, because you will be absorbed in that godless melting pot. And Allah will not provide guidance for a people who commit such acts of dhulm. So that's the way we respond to the last question. It's now 3 minutes to 3. One more question before we have the last session. Sisters, no question. Hamdul, thank you very much. Okay. Our sister from Australia. No, she's from Afghanistan.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
Maulana, question is about our children. Given that the education institutions around the world are controlled and governed by the government, and including Islamic schools, can you give us some guidelines on how to raise our children? And until we find a Muslim village to move to, before this Muslim village is ready, do you recommend homeschooling? Thank you.
In Canada, I got information from Canadian Muslims that the Canadian government is now making it obligatory law. Every school in Canada, including religious schools, are now obliged by law to teach that homosexuality is an acceptable mode of sexual conduct. Yes, the law says so. And Allah in the Quran has commanded, Ku anfusakum wa ahlikum nara. Protect yourselves and protect your families from the fire. If that is what it is today, let me tell you what tomorrow is going to be like. How do I know? Because Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam told us. When you see women dressed and yet naked, you must know what tomorrow has in store for you. When you see women dressed like men and men dressed like women, let me not say any more, I might get in trouble. You must know what tomorrow has in store for you. When you see riba all around you, to such extent that no one can escape riba. And if anyone were to say that he is free from riba, verily the dust of riba is upon him. Verily the vapor of riba is upon him. When you see these things around you, you must know what tomorrow holds in store. He said that holding on to Islam will be like holding on to hot coals. Did he not say that? So if you want to listen to patter cake baker's man, which unfortunately is what they have to do now to survive as imams, to get their salaries. That's it. That's it. To get your salary and to hold on to your green card, you have to become patter cake baker's man. I left the United States. And here in Trinidad, I have the freedom to say that what I could never say in New York. If you remain in a society in which all of these things are appearing, then remember tomorrow what's going to happen. He said that people are going to be having sexual intercourse in public like donkeys. Do you want your children to grow up with that around it? What you have to do is to turn away from areas of greater insecurity. What kind of insecurity am I talking about? The insecurity about your house when you lock it? No! I'm talking about the insecurity of what is inside of you. If you live in areas of greater insecurity, turn away from them and move to areas of greater security. Security meaning security for what resides within the heart. If it looks like heaven, get out of there. Get out of there. And go to somewhere that looks like hell. Because the Prophet said, alayhi salatu wasalam, that the road to heaven will be made to look like the road to hell. You know it, you've heard the hadith. And the road to hell will be made to look like the road to heaven. So get out of the countries which look like heaven. I don't need to call any names. You got to go back home, some of you. And move to the countries that look like hell. But even in the countries look like hell, there are areas which look like heaven, like downtown Zamalek, where the affluent suburbs of Cairo, or in Jakarta. The rest of Jakarta looks like hell, but this little suburb, like heaven. So turn away, even within a country which looks like hell. Turn away from those areas which look like heaven. My suggestion has always been, and my advice has always been, search the countryside, the remote countryside. And don't move to the countryside by yourself alone. Try to get others to come with you. Keep a low profile. Have small villages. And in those villages, strive and struggle. Strive and struggle to recover the guidance of Islam, that you live it. وَالَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا. And if you make the effort, Allah will help you. وَالَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا. Allah will help you. And that's, time is up.
My dear brothers and sisters, that's not the end. We still have a ways to go for this afternoon's program. You can use just a couple of minutes to stretch your legs if you'd like, and perhaps get something to drink, some refreshment. Just about 5 minutes, inshallah, no more than that. And when we